Welcome, panel. Recent studies show over 96% of the population in Australia are internet users, with 81% active social media users. The report also suggests that almost 1 in every 3 minutes spent online is now attributable to social media activities, with nearly 1 in 3 Australians visiting social networks to seek information about brands and products. Dana, as this behaviour grows...
Yes, Michael.
How are you, Dana?
Good
to see you. Thanks for coming.
I'm glad I get the first question.
What changes have you witnessed in browsing and discovery patterns in Australians over the last few years? And I guess from that, how crucial is having a broad channel mix and leading with a digital-first approach?
I guess from a DBZ perspective, we've seen what I call massive fragmentation, and I guess maybe a scenario might help play this out for everyone, and as marketers, what you've got to think about. So, this is going to play out in a few hours in many homes in Australia. The family's home, you've got dad in the kitchen cooking dinner. He's 45 minutes into a Jamie Oliver 15-minute recipe. He's on the iPad, obviously he's looking at realestate.com because he's blaming the kitchen. Now, women in the audience will be like, this is not a standard scenario because men don't cook. But there is a plot twist because his husband is outside in the home office pretending to listen to a final meeting of the day. He's on his computer trying to book the family holiday. He's also looking at Instagram on his phone trying to get, inspiration. And then there's 2 kids in the lounge room. One's on an iPad looking at YouTube with the dad's account, and then the other one's playing PlayStation. So I think the issue is that if you look at that scenario, you're dealing with what I'd probably call channel attention deficit disorder, where you've got people who are constantly being interrupted, trying to deal with all these different channels, and you've got identity issues as well. Who is the kid? Is it the dad on the iPad or is it the kid? So I think everyone has to think about how your customers are engaging with those channels, and then how do you be present and in front of them, because there is massive fragmentation happening, and that's why platforms like MoEngage are so important to actually try and orchestrate that, because you want to think about the signals and having a strategy around, well, how do we get in front of people if they are moving across the landscape so frequently? What does that look like?
And then from there, I guess, the last few years has been, without referring to the disruption of the pandemic, but what it's taught us is that engagement has decentralised from bricks and mortar stores to the myriad of in-store and online channels. Negar, how can brands embracing digital transformation choose the right mix of channels? How can the choice of channels elevate that consumer experience?
Yeah, I think just thinking back about what we've gone through in the last couple of years, like we used to be email-centric. We have a large program of emails. By the way, I work for e-commerce for pet supplies, if that's not clear.
So if you have pets,
I don't have pets. I have kids. It's good enough. So we basically have a lot of emails that know what kind of pets you have, if they're a puppy, if they're old, what kind of food they eat, how often they eat. And these emails are quite smart, and they go out to customers at the right time with the right message, everything. What we realized during the pandemic was there's only a very small portion of your customers that you're reaching with an email, because if you look at the opt-in rate and open rate and how many customers actually go and click and go to the website, you're basically losing the majority of the pie. So we started looking specifically at how our customers are buying. So we realized a lot of customers are either browsing early in the morning, not for the stuff they buy all the time, not for the food and the litter, but for jackets and beds and toys and the fun stuff. They're looking in the morning where they're on the way somewhere, or they're looking Sunday late evening because they have nothing to do. So then we started to kind of look at what are their patterns and kind of those interruptions. What other channels would they be on during this time where they're discovering? So social was one that came up. Those are exactly the same time people are on social a lot. So then we planned those kind of messages that are more around fun things and how to get fun things and how to just spend some time on our website browsing, and kind of target those people on social on those days. Another one we went to was SMS. Like you said, SMS is an interruption. It's inconvenient. You're getting in the way of someone's life. So we had to kind of create a strategy of what is worth interrupting. Not every message we send, not every sale is worth it? What is relevant enough, valuable enough to the customer that we're okay kind of interrupting their day? And what is the best time to interrupt them? Do we interrupt them during the hours where they're, working from home and homeschooling and they have like kids running around? Or do we actually stagger it during different accounts? And then we just do feedbacks. We look at how different customers are reacting. If they're really opening emails really well, we kind of scale back on everything else. If they're not, then we kind of go more in, and we do like dynamic hours too. So based on when they usually open, we actually try to send it around that time.
We'll come to that and some of those strategies, unpack that a little bit more around how you go about that. But I think that's a very Australia-centric or Western-centric view of what happened during the pandemic in the last few years. But to shift, I guess, continents and parts of the world, Arijeet, did that accelerate, the same trend accelerate what happened in, say, India or Southeast Asia? Or was that happening already around that multi-channel, I guess, approach to understanding customers?
So primarily coming to Southeast Asia and India, I think there's a huge difference, right? It's a digital-first population also. It's a very young population in, say, countries like Philippines, Vietnam, India, Indonesia. Majority of the population is between the ages of 15 to 40. Between 15 to 65, I think is the highest majority of population globally. And this population has been born in Android-first markets, right? So they used to, I would say, phone markets, mobile markets. They're not people who are used to using their laptops, desktops, not email first as well. So push notifications as a channel really, really worked. WhatsApp as well. So there are certain channels which have digitally worked for these audiences. Obviously, there's been a lot of digital transformation. The other thing is this population does not like going out to shop. They prefer everything coming to themselves, 10-minute deliveries, 15-minute deliveries. So now if you have to capture if you need to capture their mind in such a short span of time, a WhatsApp or a notification works way better than, say, an email or SMS or a longer form content. So yeah, that's some of the trends we've seen.
And just on push notifications, I think, is it seen also not just as a prompt for the current brand, but do people use it almost as a branding strategy as well? Because obviously in those markets, there's a lot of apps, it's app first, so you kind of need to have a strategy around being noticed more than the other 200 apps that you might have.
So that's actually a very good question. So, a lot of companies who use us, they always ask, are you working with other banks? Are you working with other e-commerce? At the end of the day, as an app, you're actually competing with all the other apps. So you're not only competing with, say, just the e-commerce or the retail ones. Because when you're in the tray, if your notification has to stand out, it has to look a little different. It has to probably be personalized. It has to be relevant. Because there's a big chance you may just be opted out. So I think standing out in the app tray, you're actually competing against all the other apps as well. So that becomes very important.
Yeah. So back on consumer trends. So weekly online shopping from Australia revealed over 50% of internet users purchase a product online, 24% order groceries online, and 13% buy secondhand items online. These connected and engaged customers will need personalised and consistent experiences across many touch points. Back to you, Negar. In your experience, how crucial is adopting an omnichannel strategy to reach, just expanding on what you mentioned before, reach and engage customers across their life cycles?
Yeah, it's really hard to measure. It's one of those things that you can clearly see the addressable market has increased. So you have so many people on email, so many people on social, so many people on SMS. You basically kind of grow the pie of people you can touch. But the bigger value is actually in the kind of reinforcement that one channel does for another. So when we know a lot of our customers, when they see social ads and then they get an email, they're a lot more likely to click on that email and actually buy from it. Same thing with kind of more traditional even marketing channels. We knew when we had TV ads, for example, all of our other channels were doing better. Same thing with notifications. When we have like notifications going out about a sale that they've already seen, on a billboard, it kind of raises all boats. It's really hard to measure, but we know any customer that's come into contact with like more than two of the same kind of brand creative, they're a lot more likely to kind of engage with it. As long as it's consistent, it's cohesive, it's not creating confusion for them.
What about you, Dana, in your experience, that measurement piece and kind of defining what success looks like across channels? How would you approach that, or how do your brands approach that, the ones you've worked with?
Well, first thing is it's super important because you can't manage, what you don't measure. So I think the brands that we see do it successfully is they've got a measurement framework, and they're effectively aggregating the data that they need and making sure that they are doing the measurement, across all the various channels. And that kind of leads to having the right data platforms that support platforms like MoEngage and, whatever it is. But yeah, the guys that are successful, they're really consistent on measuring everything and making sure that they're ingesting data, making it available for reporting, and that they've got a clear framework around that. And look, some platforms help you do that out of the box and give you insights, and but many of the customers we deal with, they've got lots of different data sources. They don't always have everything unified, so that's where it becomes important to actually have a structure around it.
Eventually, all our marketing efforts, be it choosing right mix of channels and personalisation, it's really to delight the customer lifecycle, ultimately, to drive retention and engagement. Negar, with a background in customer lifecycle management and someone that's worked across the acquisition side as well, engagement, retention, how important are the data-driven decisions in delivering what the customer exactly needs?
We've seen this a lot. We've done a lot of experiments with like changing the branding of an email, changing the offer, even giving more coupons, less coupons. By far, the thing that is most relevant and gets the most impact is if what you're saying is relevant to the customer in that moment. So we do a lot of models of kind of what product the customer needs to buy. If you get the product right, those emails, those campaigns blow up. Similarly, the timing is also super important. So we do modeling of, when customers need to buy the next product, and we try to get ahead of that product and let them know whether it's coming, or maybe you're a week away, but it's on sale this week, so you could buy it earlier. When customers start to see how relevant you're being, how you're using their data in a way that is benefiting them truly, they become a lot more engaged. And those are the customers that then are more likely to open the rest of your campaigns because they know there's value in what they receive.
So while discussing data-centric approach, it's probably worth shining light on the organisational challenge of having data sitting across silos. I think everybody in the room who's got multiple platforms and running multiple campaigns and channels has that frustration, but ultimately the customer feels the frustration because it's such a disconnect between what they've signed up to, essentially, whether it be an email newsletter or downloaded the app. Dana, what can companies do to rectify the siloing of data? And what are some of the benefits of having a centralised and unified view of a customer?
I'm getting all the hard questions, aren't I?
Yeah, you're pretty smart. So I'm not saying that the others
That's very
aren't,
kind
but
of you,
Dana,
Michael. That's not true.
You, mate.
I'll answer in three parts. I think the first thing people often go to is technology to solve that siloed problem. So platforms like MoEngage and our friends at Mparticle are fantastic at aspects of aggregating data and kind of breaking those silos down. But it's not the only answer. I'll come to what maybe part of the key answer is for many organisations. In terms of benefits, I mean, they're huge. I think you just touched on loyalty. So if you've got your data together, you've got a better view of the customer, you're going to drive loyalty, you're going to drive better relevance through better marketing because you know the customer better. So that's kind of the first key one. The second one I would say is that you are going to enable better analytics and insights because you've got your data together and therefore you continue to enrich the understanding of the customer, which means you can make better decisions. The third one is really an internal team benefit, which is you're not trying to chase down data and deliver marketing and, try and connect different data together. And that leads to kind of the final benefit, which is if you invest in a platform like MoEngage, it works best when it's fed with the best set of data. So if you get that data together, all the systems that you invest in are going to perform, much better. You're going to get much better tech investment. You're not spending time trying to bring in different data sources and kind of deal with different teams. So what I would say, one of the things that I think the mistakes businesses make, and I'd be really interested in a show of hands, everyone has this concept of single customer view. Now, I'd be really interested in how many businesses here have a single customer view. Oh, not even one hand. Oh, we've got a few hands. Now, how many businesses have tried a single customer view and felt that it failed? Have we? Yeah, okay, we've got one. Yeah, got two. So I think the key thing for marketers to think about is just build a marketing view of the customer. You don't need to try and solve everything, but thinking about how you centralise your data in a way that describes the customer, feeds platforms, can bring data back into the platform and kind of take that journey. But the biggest success that we see is actually it's a people problem. So where silos happen in organisations, they reflect externally. So if you're siloed internally in the way you think about a customer, that's going to really reflect in your data, unfortunately. So if you think about your business, are you set up really as a customer-centric business, or do you have different departments fighting over the customer? Have you got a loyalty team that thinks about the customer in a loyalty way? Then you've got an e-commerce team that's thinking about the customer. Well, this is an e-commerce customer. And so what that happens is that creates a whole bunch of silos. So if you can solve that problem internally, if you can think about the customer as a customer, what's the right thing for them at the right time, and set up all your OKRs and your reward system around that then, with good technology, is the path to kind of breaking those silos down, at least as we see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the last probably few weeks or even recently, there's been articles around marketers buying tech in this market and the obsession with buying a lot of tech. I think there's been a few events recently at the beginning of the year just kind of trying to navigate that complexity, which we'll touch on with a fireside chat, but it's must be getting harder and harder, and it's really hard to understand what the USPs are. But it's almost like Australians love buying loads of
Stuff,
things.
Yeah. Including Martech. Capitalism and consumerism.
Yeah, and you mentioned the resource or just that kind of who's the owner. Things on multi-year deals, and those people move on, and then things just tick over and things renew, and then before you know it, you have a marketing technology stack of 5 or 6 things. So it's kind of no surprise when you see 11,000 on that new Martech Loom Escape or whatever that Escape thing that Scott Brinker released. It shouldn't be a surprise really, because in a single organisation there's about 20 or 30, so just for marketing. So it's Arijeet, is this something that is the obsession around buying tech in other parts of, say, Southeast Asia in particular?
The budgets are lesser. So that's the first thing I'm going to talk about, let's say in India and Vietnam, Philippines, not Singapore, but since the budgets are lesser, they have to work on certain restraints. And when you're working on restraints, you're just trying to see what are you trying to do. Every brand is trying to do sales at the end of the day, right? And so they will buy the tech which can just give them highest amount of sales. How do they get more money in with that amount of budget? So it's the ROI factor which comes in. It's not, I think Dana talked about tech shopping, right? Tech consumerism. So like any marketer will go to the market, will buy like 5 different products. But what is the usability? Is it important for your brand? Do you think you'll get ROI using those 5 is a question. I don't think that privilege is not there with some of the brands in some of the other countries.
Cool. Negar, how can businesses balance their resources and budget? So back on the assessment and the evaluation. That's straight to Negar now, yeah. How can they balance the resource and budget challenge? Obviously, resource challenged have been here for quite some time in some departments. Yeah. What's your view there?
Yeah, I think some of the things we took for advantage, I think, in the last couple of years was, COVID gave us a big boost. There was a lot of revenue. We started investing in a lot of tools among, resources. Going back now, I think what we have found works best is to kind of focus on the customers you have. So instead of going out for really high CPAs and going out to new channels, we are kind of focusing back on what we have and what we do really well. So instead of trying to be 20 things to 20 segments of people, we're really getting good at what is the unique value we have to our customers and why are they coming to us, and what would we need to do to retain them versus trying to kind of expand to new parts of the market. As for budgeting, obviously a lot of budget has gone from acquisition to retention, which is, I think, the better path to go down because it's a more of a long-term play and it will kind of create growth ongoing. And a lot of our investment is going into things that are kind of building for the future and building for the next few years versus things like CPAs that you pay today to get a customer today.
Great. And finally, just to round this one out, to all panelists, mainly Dana and Negar, so no bias here, Arijeet. From your experience, what are some crucial factors involved in designing responsive mobile and app experiences? Share those best practices if you can, and one takeaway for the audience, if possible.
That's a really hard question. It's a bit left field, actually, given the topic. I think keep things simple. I mean, the interesting thing when you think about apps is apps, for example, very easy to overload them with lots of features, and it's also easy to be led by the customer in terms of lots of stuff. But if you think about usage behavior on an app, you've got to be using it all the time. Uber's a good example of, yes, you can build a lot of features in because people are using it on a frequently basis. But if your app is something that someone maybe uses once a month, or once every few weeks, keeping it simple and core to what you're trying to do is I think, going to be better because you're not building stuff that you don't need. But also better for the customer because they're not trying to navigate and kind of understand every time they come in and learn something new. That would be the insight, having worked with product teams and complex retail apps, etc. Yeah. Great.
Negar?
We're in an interesting position because we're actually launching an app now. So we're in the process of getting one out. I think what's really interesting is we spent 6 months doing a lot of research and coming up with the strategy of what the app was and what were like the main values that it brought to the customers. We got the first version out. We got it into the app store. We didn't tell anyone. Customers started using it, and they're not using it for that. They don't use the features that we built that we thought were the value, and they're doing other things. So we're getting a completely different signal of what customers find valuable. And even though we had done research, we could not have seen it coming. So I think just go in with the idea of you're building it for them and they know what they want. So if you can get customers to interact with it earlier, get as much feedback of what's valuable for them in the app, we were solving the wrong problem. We didn't know what problem we had to be solved. The problem customers solve on desktop is very different from an app. And we just took our knowledge for granted that we kind of know what our customers want.
Fantastic response. Thank you. I think that wraps everything up here. So I'd like to thank our speakers, Dana, Negar, and Arijeet.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, panel.
And I will
Thank you,
call
room.
upon the next panel.